I'm super excited to be here today. Thank you to the committee for inviting me to talk about docs, to talk about developer experience, something I'm super passionate about. My experience creating docs, working with DevX teams, and creating developer resources has always been driven by one core value, and that is empathy. I want to put myself in my user's shoes. I want to create docs that solve their problems. And I'm going to show you how you can embed empathy within your engineering teams, when you're designing schemas, when you're writing code. So, my name is Sarah Sanders. I'm a senior technical writer at Highnote. We are a payments company, and we use a GraphQL API. I lead our efforts for documenting our GraphQL API and helping the DevX team design the tools that our developers use to implement with our API. Some fun facts about me. I love nonfiction, historical fiction, documentaries. I love indie video games, and I got really into making fresh pasta this year. So let's get started. So empathy. We hear empathy a lot in marketing, in customer support, and the way we communicate with our users. But where we don't hear empathy a lot is in our engineering orgs, in our developer experience teams. And I like to think of empathy at this stage because we really need to be anticipating our developers' pain points, their needs, how they work, the tools that they're using early on when we're actually writing the code and when we're developing these experiences for them to make sure that we're building products that are intuitive and that help our developers and surprise and delight them. So this approach involves asking questions really early on. Asking yourself when you're writing code, asking yourself when you're designing a schema, when you're naming things, when you're reviewing your schema with your colleagues. Asking empathy-driven questions about how do my developers need to use this? What are their use cases? Questions like this. I also want to take a step back and show you kind of a visual of what this looks like. So when I think of a product or an API, I like to think of it as a sphere. And within that sphere, there's layers. And we have engineering and developer experience at the core. When you embed empathy-driven decisions at the core, this creates a really strong ripple effect that ends at the end user, ends at your internal teams who are using your APIs, ends at whoever is ingesting your API. This creates a strong feeling that product or that platform or that API was built to solve their problems, and it frees your users to create really creative, innovative things. Yesterday, the panel talked about why GraphQL was created, and there was only a handful of us that raised our hands that we were developing mobile applications. I think GraphQL embodies empathy because it allows us to create all these cool, exciting, creative things. Who would have thought GraphQL would have enabled Highnote to create like a world-class payments company? So if you skip empathy at this core, though, you kind of break down that ripple effect. The product doesn't feel intuitive. It doesn't feel right. Maybe the API is hard to use, or the platform is hard to use. So we have to be thinking about empathy when we're early on in development. So what is the impact on developer experience? I kind of already touched the feeling of products, creating products that are intuitive and enjoyable to use. Let's talk about schema design. Schema design matters. When we talk about AI and we talk about language models interacting with our APIs, when we're designing our schema, we need to be thinking about those things to make sure that an AI can talk to our schema, or that a developer looking at our schema can understand the structure of the data that they're looking at. Naming matters. I'm a big champion for naming. I sit on my GraphQL review committee at Highnote, and I'm always nagging people about naming objects and types and stuff in our API. So this matters. I champion for naming because I want our developers to know how to use our API. Documentation, this is my wheelhouse. I've been writing developer docs and REST and GraphQL docs for a while now. And I don't want to provide documentation that just explains how something works. I really want to anticipate use cases. I want to anticipate sticky points. I want to provide context that goes beyond just how something works. And then we also have developer tools. So think of like the sandboxes you provide. Think of your API explorers or your code snippets. We want to build developer tools that are rooted in empathy and that delight our developers, that delight our users, and solve their problems. AI has kind of been the main character today. Got a lot of screen time, and it's something that we have to be thinking about, and this kind of folds into my forward-thinking approach. So we need to be looking at what advances are happening, not just in AI, but all the technologies, across the board, and how this is impacting future developers. So, people that are in school learning how to, become software developers. We need to be anticipating how the workflows of developers are changing today. And then we need to be building products. We need to be designing our APIs to be flexible and have a foundation that supports these innovations. Without that, we get stagnant. We don't have flexible products. We can't build those cool things that I've mentioned a few times. So how do we do this? What are the takeaways? I'm a huge champion for dedicated user research. It doesn't matter if this is within your DevX team, your product managers, if you have a dedicated user research team. User research matters. Without the strong persona of who is using your API, who's using your documentation, who's using your tools, you can't meet their needs. You can't create an empathetic, intuitive experience for them. The second is use your own products, so dog fooding. I'm a tester. I like to get my hands dirty with everything that I'm writing about. I test. I use my own products. I want to understand where my users are getting stuck. If they're getting stuck, I want to be able to quickly fix that or remediate if I need to. And I want to get the full experience that I'm delivering to my users. So for an example, at Highnote, we have an embedded API explorer within our documentation. When I'm testing code snippets, when I'm writing code snippets, I could easily open Insomnia, do it in there, interact in my test environment, copy paste, call it a day. But I go through our embedded API explorer, and I use the same experience that my users are using so that I can anticipate their needs, see how things are landing within the products that we're delivering for them. The other two, the third and the fourth points kind of go hand in hand. We want to focus on diverse feedback. I know Jeff talked about, external feedback and, getting involved in communities and talking to your users. I also champion for internal feedback. Talking to your teams that interact directly with your customers, whether this is, your support teams, this is, your internal developers that are using your APIs, this is your implementation teams who are helping your users on board with your API. I do these focus groups with my implementation teams and my product managers, where I get the word that's on the ground. I get their feedback as they're implementing with our users. Another thing with community, I think community means a lot to us because we're here. So go to conferences, talk to people that are building cool things, see what's working in their organizations or their teams, and adopt similar mentalities or approaches. Also, get involved where your developers are, meet them where they're at. Whether that's Discord or Reddit or wherever that might be, get involved where they're at. And lastly, I believe in making empathy a core value. Whether that's you're a manager on a team and you want to make that a team value, whether you're a CEO and you want to make that a company value, empathy attracts empathy. And when you embed empathy in a culture, you attract people who believe that themselves, that want to build products that are really embedded in empathy. So thank you guys. I have a talk later today about GraphQL docs. I'm going to go in a deeper dive of some Highnote things we've done, how we present our API, our schema to our users, and the cool developer tools that we've built. Thank you guys.